I'm Kathy Glaser. I'm from the Aging and Disability Resource Center of Ozaukee County. And what that is it's considered kind of a one-stop shop for people either 18 or older that have a disability or anyone over the age of 60 to look for resources, to look for funding programs, to look for education, all those kinds of things. So my role there is the dementia care specialist. And as the dementia care specialist, I have kind of three tenets within my role. I certainly work with individuals and their families that might be experiencing some form of dementia, are concerned about memory loss, or want to have more conversation about what's happening in their life and their ability to manage their lives. I do a fair amount of training with county staff to make sure that staff is dementia capable and can meet those needs and refer people to resources as needed. And then the third part of my job is this, going out and doing public education, community awareness events, and having conversation about what does that mean for Ozaukee County to be dementia friendly. I love coming to talk to congregations because congregations are such a vital part of this effort. You might be the only people that see somebody week to week and know if somebody falls off the grid, something is going on with them. You might be the people that have known somebody for 40 or 50 years and can see changes before their neighbor who has known them for 3 months can. So congregations are a vital part of this effort. And it's important because of the numbers. When we're looking at numbers, we're looking at these increasing all the time. These are the stats we're using right now. These are our most recent from 2014, which is 1 in 9 people over 65 and 1 in 3 over 85 have some form of dementia. In Wisconsin, about 120,000 and about 2,000 in Ozaukee County. People pretty quickly think of places like Lasada or Newcastle as folks who have dementia maybe living, and that's not the case. The vast majority live at home. Probably about 3/4 of folks that have issues with dementia live at home, and of that, 30% of them are living alone. And so we know we have all kinds of people out there that are working on getting by day to day but might need a little bit of support. The other piece is that about 50% of people that have some form of dementia are never diagnosed. So that remains, and if somebody does have that diagnosis on their chart, they're thinking somewhere between 40 and 60% of people and their families are never told. So it's an undisclosed diagnosis that often comes up when somebody's at the hospital or somebody requests medical records for some other reason, and all of a sudden this is on their diagnosis list for the last 4 years and has never been part of the conversation. So I'm going to give you a little bit of mindset that I want you to think about. This is an analogy that was written by somebody from the Dementia Alliance, and it's called an airport analogy of dementia. Let's say you've traveled across the ocean by plane to another country. Let's say it's to a country where you only understand a little bit of the language. You're tired. You've been sitting in an enclosed space for 8 to 10 hours with 100 other people, many of whom have been sneezing and coughing. You didn't sleep at all, and you're exhausted. You're struggling to put your thoughts together. You can't hear very well. Your ears are plugged from the air pressure. Your eyes are dry. Your vision's a little blurry. And when you stand to walk, you find you're weak and a little unsteady on your feet because your feet are a little swollen. Now imagine you're waiting to get off the plane and you have to catch a connecting flight. You try to wait patiently behind the other passengers who are pulling their suitcases and bags from the overheads. You try to stay calm, but your anxiety increases a little as time passes. When you're finally able to get off the plane, you enter the airport. It's crowded. People are rushing and pushing to get through. You try to move out of the way, and you begin walking. There are signs everywhere. You attempt to read them, but the words are small and the directions are confusing. There are too many words on the signs. You know a few basic words in this language, but the anxiety is causing it to be more difficult for you to read and understand. These thoughts go through your mind. Do I still have my passport? Will I be able to make it in time? Will my luggage arrive? What if I don't catch my plane? Will I have to stay here in the airport? Will they stop me at security? Will they need to pat me down? I hate that. Everyone's moving quickly and talking fast. You aren't sure which direction you should be heading. It's loud and they're making announcements over the speakers that you can't understand. You try to talk to people passing by, but they're in a hurry and they look annoyed. You finally find airport personnel and they do stop to listen to your question, but they speak quickly and you don't understand what they're saying. They point in one direction and then the other. The look on your face should indicate you don't understand, but they don't notice. They just keep talking. They don't slow down. Then they walk away, leaving you to fend for yourself. You're close to tears. You can barely think because you're so tired. You sit down and you feel like crying. You put your face in your hands. At that moment, someone reaches down and touches your arm. You look up at a warm, friendly, smiling face. She asks, "Are you okay? Can I help you?" You can tell she means it, and it isn't just a platitude. At that moment, you feel your heart rate slow down. You feel the pressure in your chest fading. Your thinking improves. You can understand her. She speaks a few words in your language. She speaks calmly and slowly. She doesn't shout. She listens and is patient while you come up with the words. She makes eye contact. She smiles and nods. She pauses and may repeat what she just said if needed. She gives you one piece of information at a time. She gives you one direction at a time. She confirms that you understand what she said. Maybe she walks with you to your destination, or she tells you the next place where you can ask for help. She makes sure you catch your flight, and her kindness stays with you and improves your mood for your entire journey. That's just a snippet to have you think about what that's like. What that's like to travel, what that's like to be overwhelmed, what that's like to have information overload and feel like we're floundering, and what it's like when somebody's willing to slow down the bus and help us, right? To see us as a person, to hear what we might need, and to help us along our journey. And that is what being dementia friendly is all about. Going the wrong way. So the dementia friendly goal, this is what we want to do. Ease fear and isolation, and also increasing access to the resources to help people live with dementia. There's no cure for forms of dementia. There is no medication that's going to slow the disease. It might take the edge off the symptoms, but we have to figure out how to help people live with dementia. Now, dementia is an umbrella. It's not a specific disease. If someone were to say to you they have dementia, the next question from you should be, what kind? Just like if somebody told you they have cancer. Dementia, again, is this overall umbrella. And the symptoms include memory issues, communication and language, issues with ability to focus and pay attention, reasoning and judgment, and visual perception. And those have to be impairing people's ability to function in day-to-day life to have it be considered dementia. There are many things besides a form of one of the diseases that causes the symptoms of dementia that can be causing these same symptoms. You might see people that are having issues with depression. You might see people that are on multiple medications that are interacting with each other. You might see people that are using a lot of alcohol, have other metabolic issues, have vitamin deficiencies, visual or hearing deficits, or again, along with that, bereavement, changes in health, all different kinds of issues that somebody might be having in their day-to-day life that causes them to have a harder time focusing and managing themselves. And is Alzheimer's the only dementia? That's the one we talk about all the time, right? So people are often hearing about the Alzheimer's Association, and Alzheimer's accounts for somewhere around 70% of the different forms of irreversible dementias, but there's a whole variety of other ones. Vascular dementia is a dementia that's caused by people that are having issues with their vascular system. So they might have had a stroke, they might have other blood flow issues that are causing that form of dementia. Lewy body dementia is a dementia that looks a lot like Parkinson's. The onset of movement changes and dementia, memory loss, and hallucinations all kind of come in one package, and that's how they look a little bit more at it being Lewy body dementia. But Parkinson's, as it progresses, also causes a form of dementia. Frontotemporal dementia is a tricky one because that affects the front and sides of people's brain, and that does not have memory loss as a symptom. So people think, well, they don't have memory loss, so it can't be dementia, right? It can't be Alzheimer's. And they're right, it wouldn't be Alzheimer's, but it could be a different kind of dementia. This is a dementia that's kind of an ugly one because the front of our brain is our filter. So you can imagine when people don't have a filter, how they're going through life. What goes through their head comes out their mouth. What impulse control is also in that part of the brain. The Alzheimer's Association will tell us a number of people with frontotemporal dementia are incarcerated because they've gotten in a bar fight. They've gotten in some kind of physical conflict. They can't back away and mediate what they're saying. And then big in Wisconsin, of course, because we're often termed the #1 drinking state, is Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which used to be called alcohol dementia. So that's a very specific, different kind of dementia. So again, if people are having those symptoms of dementia, we would want them to go to their doctor and rule out any other reversible causes, physical changes, and then we'd want somebody to know what kind of disease they have that's causing these symptoms for a couple reasons. We want them to know how it might progress. We want them to know what their brain is capable of doing and what it isn't, and what type of support they might need, and what they can do on their own. I keep going the wrong way. It's unnatural to me that you go left to go forward. So I'm trying to go left. Again, dementia-friendly congregations. We want you to know that your parishioners might be having issues, or they might be having issues within their family. You might have some really stressed out caregivers that are part of your congregation that you need to support, and you need to recognize and see how you can help people stay engaged within your congregation. And again, the importance of the church in connecting with people at every stage of the disease. The part of our brain that we keep the longest are the parts that have prayer, old prayer in them, music in them, so many things that we are doing in our ritual life within a congregation stays with people till very late in the disease, if not the entire disease. And so our ability to connect with people as religious faith communities is tremendous throughout the disease. And so we need to recognize that and own that and use that to best help people not feel isolated. So when you're talking to folks that are having these symptoms, what do I want you to do? Again, because I showed you all of these different signs that could be causing what's going on, I don't want you to make assumptions, okay? Sometimes we think, because of those stats I showed you, that this is an old person's disease. And I'll tell you, the youngest person that I have on my radar right now is 29 years old. She has early onset dementia, a familial form of dementia that her mom, her aunt, and her grandma all had to, that they got in their early 30s and did not survive their 30s. So a very different type, a very isolated type of dementia, but it can be any age. We see a whole bunch of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s with early onset issues also. So again, don't make assumptions. They might not understand what you're doing or what you've said. Just in that airport analogy, we overwhelm people with all kinds of information. We often tell people 5 things in one paragraph that we're expecting them to remember and be on the same page as us. We switch gears without telling people we're switching gears. Somebody walks past us and we say, oh, and them, they just had a granddaughter and blah, 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 and this is going on in their family, and they're struggling to keep up with us in that conversation. So I want you to slow down the bus, treat people respectfully, and offer a lot of reassurance. Watch people's face. See if they're getting what you're wanting them to do. How do we know when people are irritated with us? We know, right? How do we know? You're kind of chuckling. All these things that I have listed, right? Rolling the eyes, sighing, that people stop talking to us. Isn't it great when somebody's irritated with you and they just walk away? What just happened here? I thought we were in a conversation. Or when a clerk won't help you because they're talking on their cell phone or they're doing whatever the case might be. So we want people to avoid that. We want you to pay attention, be friendly, make eye contact, and smile. Make somebody feel like they've been seen. But also, I don't want you, now don't feel like a victim because you're in the front row, I don't want you to stand over somebody. I don't want you too close in somebody's face. You know, we don't like that. We all have our personal space, right? I don't want you to talk to somebody like a child. But I do want them to know you're talking to them. Because everything peripherally, every other noise is going to be equally loud. That ability to filter other conversation from your conversation is very challenging. So I want you to approach somebody from the front, make eye contact, and make sure they know you're talking to them, okay? You can talk a bit slower, but do not be condescending. We know when we're being spoken to as a child, right? Right, sweetie, honey, blah, 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 right? Some of that kind of sappy, syrupy. But use short, brief sentences and information and ask one question at a time. We think we're really good at this and we're really bad at it. Just listen to your conversation and think how often you ask multiple questions and somebody's still processing the first piece. They think that people probably get 1 in 7 words that come out of our mouth. So if I were going to give you a paragraph and 1 in 7 words was in the paragraph, how do you think you would do understanding what I'm trying to communicate to you? It might be the exact opposite of what I'm trying to communicate to you because you missed 1 or 2 of the key words that were in that, right? But don't raise your voice. Don't yell at somebody. We often make the mistake of somebody not understanding us, being that they can't hear us. If you go to a care center, people are often talking really loud to people. And all that means is it's information overload, okay? Then it's just noise. You are just noise. So if you're in front of them, you're talking to them face to face, slowly and respectfully. That's the kind of communication. And don't talk to other people like they're not there. That happens all the time. Somebody asks a question, somebody doesn't get it right, so then I'm going to talk to your daughter now. You're sitting right here, I'm going to only speak to your daughter about you. How would we like that? Do we like people talking about us in front of us? Not particularly, right? We would like to be engaged in that conversation. And listen. Repeat what you heard them say to make sure that you're both on the same page. You might have heard them say something that might have been what they said, but that might not have been what they wanted to say. So what went through their brain was not what came out of their mouth, okay? You can say, I'm sorry I misunderstood you, as opposed to, that's not what you just said, right? Very different kind of response from us. Tell me again what you said, what you need, how can I help you? Try not to correct people. Just go with it, okay? If they tell you they don't want juice and then they're going to get juice, help them get juice, right? That's okay, just keep going. Most importantly, you all know many people's life story, right? You know them as people, you know their history. How can you enforce that, reinforce that and their importance in the congregation? How can you see them as an individual instead of just an overarching generalization about what's going on with somebody or who somebody is? So if we know that you used to be the council president, or you used to be in choir, or you built the home, on Dunges Bay Road, or whatever the case might be, those are all points of reference to people that make them realize we know them. We know them as a person, okay? And if we don't know those points of reference, it's really good for us to learn them, okay? Learn somebody's history. Learn what's important to them. Learn what they're interested in, because those are the things that stay, okay? What you learned last, you lose first. So if I met you a month ago, you might not know me at all, because I never stayed in your long-term memory. We had a fleeting conversation, and that conversation was gone, maybe within the hour, okay? But their grade school friend who they went to this school with, who they grew up with, who they played football with, whatever the case might be, is still there, even though they haven't seen that person for 50 years. Okay, and that's just how those diseases progress. So when you know somebody's life story, they're saying things to you that then make sense, that otherwise wouldn't have. So if I'm saying to somebody, your granddaughter's going to come and pick you up, we're going to wait here for her to come and pick you up. And his frame of reference is that he is a 25-year-old man who lives in northern Wisconsin and is not married. We have a disconnect here, don't we? Who is she talking to? I'm not even married. She thinks I have a grandchild, and a grandchild who can drive? I mean, do you see the disconnect here? If I say to you, your daughter is waiting at your condo, and you think you live in a farm in Belleville, what are we talking about? I don't know you then, right? Because I don't know those frames of reference of where you are. If somebody is talking to me about home, and I say, tell me where home is, and they say the farm, and I know they grew up on a farm in Monroe, I can talk about that, right? As opposed to saying, that isn't where you live. You haven't lived there for 50 years. Okay, that's an unsupportive type of connection. We get real big on reality orientation. We like to pull people into our reality and say, this is where you need to be. And that isn't where people need to be. Okay, that isn't where their reality is. So we need to go where they are. And we need to connect with them in that way. Okay? They might talk about a different pastor at church. Who was a previous pastor? How many people know other pastors that led this church? Anybody? Most people do. Good, yeah, exactly. I hope so. I agree.
Who's that young man over there?
Do you have a spot where pastors' pictures are in the church? No?
We should.
That's kind of an interesting thing to look at with people, is that they'll often recognize somebody at a different part in their life if they have been in this congregation for a long time. And a lot of people have, right? People have been in a congregation for 40 or 50 years. So that's just a good way for you to connect with somebody on a different level. The other thing is that this might be their church, but church might look a little different. Have there been any changes here? Yeah? What has changed?
The sanctuary.
The sanctuary. And how has the sanctuary changed?
Well, it's actually had 2 or 3 changes from its original construction.
Okay. Are there pictures of the old sanctuary anywhere?
No.
Okay. There probably might be in the catacombs somewhere, right?
I know we do.
The reason that I'm bringing those things up is because if you are visiting somebody from church or somebody is at church here, those are great conversation pieces to look at. Do you remember being in Sunday school here? What did that look like? You know, Christian Ed, what did they call it then? When I was a kid, I'm Lutheran, when I was a kid they called it Luther League. Okay, that's not lingo at all now, but somebody my age, if you talked about Luther League and they were Lutheran, they might know what you're talking about, okay? So what are those kinds of things that help us connect with somebody and help us connect the church to them? So other congregational considerations. I'm going to run through some of these. I have them written out, and I'll give them to you, but it's just things to think about when you're thinking about, as a congregation, what that might be. Here I am, aging myself, putting on my glasses. Okay, so buildings. Are the church buildings well lit? If you walk through your church, do you consider it well lit? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Have you been in churches that are these dark hallways? Yeah, that's really intimidating to people, to be walking down dark hallways that they aren't familiar with. Make sure that the signs are clear and easy to read and don't have too much information on them. You have pretty good signage when you come in, and it kind of points you in different directions. You have your room number by signs, which is a little unfortunate, because what does E208 women mean? Women's bathroom might be easier, right? You know, just very basic. Make sure that there's enough space to walk around, and there are spaces that you can talk to somebody in private. So if you're out in the narthex vestibule talking to people when they get here, and there's all kinds of chaos and conversation going on around you, how likely do you think it is that they're going to hear you and understand you and be able to pay attention to what you're saying? Not very, right? Your little coat closet area might be a good place to step over and talk to somebody one-on-one, and your parlor area is beautiful. And it probably is quiet or quieter before service starts, right? So that might be a better time to welcome somebody, or a place to welcome somebody and connect with them if you had a question or conversation with them. Notice boards. If you have some very basic notice boards, can people get where they need to go just by looking at the notice board? Maybe, maybe not, right? Make sure that there's access to outside space. People love to be outside. If somebody's really frustrated in church and overwhelmed, is there a bench for them to go sit outside? For them to go out with their caregiver? People are nodding, yeah? Is there a place that they can have a personal, private conversation? Okay. Does everybody in church know about that? Maybe, maybe not? Yeah? Do your bathrooms lock from the inside?
No.
They don't. Okay. Is there a bathroom that people can use as a couple or as two people? Yeah?
Yes.
The downstairs one is?
Yes.
Do people know where that is?
No.
Right. So, you know, those kinds of things are just considerations for building and environment kinds of things. Prayer is another big thing. What are dementia-friendly prayers? Kind of what I mentioned. The things that we can say like the back of our hand, right? I can be in conversation with somebody who can give me 1 or 2 word responses. And if I start to say the Lord's Prayer, they can say the Lord's Prayer with me. It's an amazing thing. If I start to say the 23rd Psalm, whatever the case might be, if I start to say the benediction, you know, so all those kinds of things are things that people remember. The doxology that you did, you know, those are things that people have in their memory banks and can help you slow down, help them slow down, and the two of you connect. You want it to be a quiet space, again, without distractions, and you want to tell the person what you're doing. I would love to pray with you. Is it okay if we pray together? Can I hold your hands? Some people will want you to hold their hands, some people won't. But some people feel like that's a good connection with them. Again, that piece of not too long, not too involved, you know, Jesus loves you, whatever the case might be. The songs that go along with that, right? There are some very basic songs that we learned early on. Jesus loves me, this I know, might be one of those that we can all sing and that we might be able to sing together. And also when you're praying, if you're praying for somebody that has dementia, keep in mind their family and their caregivers, okay? Because they become the forgotten folks in this whole situation. When you're talking about what this is like to watch somebody disappear in front of you, because that's really what's happening here. We're talking about a fair amount of grief that's happening with people, with spouses, with children, with grandchildren. You know, often grandchildren fall off the grid fastest because they weren't in their frame of reference long enough, right? Or they might become a child because they're thinking of you. You know, I'm a 51-year-old woman, but my 23-year-old daughter might be more in their frame of reference, okay? So she might become Kathy, and I might become their sister, okay? So that's all very natural, but it's also very hard. If you have been in a 50-some-year marriage with somebody and they no longer know your relationship, that's really a lot of grief that's going on there. That's a lot of heartache. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to people and what that might be like for them as they experience that situation. Sometimes we can put it into words really easily, right? We can say, I can't imagine how devastating that was that they didn't know you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm so sorry that you're watching this. We wouldn't wish this on our worst enemy, much less our spouse of 50 years, right? So when we're talking about those kinds of things, keep in mind the caregivers, keep them in your prayers, and help them. How can we as a congregation help them? Is there anything that they need that we can do? Is it stopping in to visit? Is it bringing a meal? Is it helping drive somebody somewhere? What might that be that they have a lot on their plate as they're trying to manage it? And what can we do to help? You know, we often say, let us know what you need, right? That's a really easy, quick response. And whoever tells you what they need? Anybody? Nobody, right? If you say, I'm going to bring a meal on Tuesday or Wednesday. I can bring a meal on Tuesday or Wednesday. Would either of those work? And tell me what your family does or doesn't eat. Is that a different kind of an offer? If you're going to be able to drive somebody to church instead of their daughter coming up from Milwaukee who has her own congregation that she would like to be connected with, is that a different kind of an offer? Maybe, right? So think about those kinds of things too as you're thinking about praying for caregivers and then praying for yourselves to think about how best we support people, okay? Looking deep in yourself and saying, what does that mean? Dementia-friendly worship services. This is always a little bit of a tricky one because an hour sitting might be way too long, okay? The songs might go great, the prayers might go fine, and then the sermon. Do not take that personal. Because what you say might be resonating very well with somebody, and they might be right on track, and they might not be at all. And all they're hearing is noise, and all they're paying attention to is everything going on around them. So what happens if somebody gets up and leaves during the sermon? Is that okay?
Insurance?
Yeah, exactly. If a pastor says to a caregiver, it's really important for you to be in church, our congregation really wants you to be here. If church is too long, get up and walk around, go sit in the parlor, whatever works for you. I love the wiggle room. That was a perfect name for that kids area, right? The wiggle room. Well, guess what? People with dementia have a lot of wiggling going on too. So if nobody is giving them the eye as they're leaving church, right? If they leave and come back again for whatever the next part might be, if it's the offering, if it's the choir anthem, whatever it is, but we smile at them and we say we're glad you're here, that's a different kind of response to accepting somebody in church, right? And it's a different kind of response if we have then given them permission to say, it's okay, we know it's long. We know an hour is long. We can also think about, is there any other type of worship service that we might do? Do we ever have just a half-hour service of hymn and prayer? What would that look like? You know, anybody could do it. Doesn't have to be pastor, right? It can be anybody as your parish nurse team. It can be, you know, whoever it might be to say, this is a time to be connected. And this is a way for us to reinforce to people that throughout diseases, they are part of God's kingdom and they are beloved by God. Because people feel like they aren't a lot of the time. They feel like they're isolated. They feel like they have sometimes done something to cause this to happen. Some people are very angry at God. You know, just like we were talking this morning, we were talking about, you know, the joys and celebrating the joys, but it's kind of hard to celebrate the trauma, right? When people were talking about people having cancer and people struggling with these different things. When we were talking about TJ, you know, and what that was like for that mom. That's a very different situation then, isn't it? And so the same thing happens with dementia. So when we're looking at this and we're talking about worship services, what might that look like? What area might be best for that to happen? Is the sanctuary best for that to happen if there's all kinds of ambient noise and everything else going on? Or people coming and going, right? That happens too. We have a meeting and people are walking up and down the hall and talking and doing whatever, and we can tune it out, but other folks can't tune it out. So what might those things look like? I'm going to leave those with you to think about, because this is not a one and done conversation to have in a congregation. This is a conversation to say, what does this mean to us? Because if you have met somebody that has Alzheimer's, you've met one person with Alzheimer's, right? Because all of us have very different history, all of us have very different lifestyle, all of us have very different routines. One of the exercises I like to do with caregivers, with professional caregivers, is I have them write down answers to different questions. And those questions are, what time do you get up in the morning? What do you usually like to have for breakfast? What is the first thing you do in your day? Just some daily routines. What do you do for physical activity? What do you do for enjoyment? What does your evening look like? How late do you stay up at night? What do you like to watch on television? What kind of music do you like? Those kinds of things. People write them all down, and then I say, okay, everybody stand up and move 2 seats to the left. And sit down. And here's you. Here's your life. Congratulations. How's it working for you? Okay, well now, I'm a morning person, but according to me, I'm not, right? I eat a huge breakfast. I don't eat a huge breakfast. I like to be around people, and that's how I have stress relieved. And I might be a person that needs quiet to have stress relieved. So when we look at things we impose on people without finding out what their routines and habits are, that's really important too, because that can be an automatic disconnect, okay? I have people that have always been second or third shift workers, and all of a sudden we're expecting them to be morning people and to get up at 6:30 in the morning. They haven't seen 6:30 ever, unless it's coming home from work, right? Coming home from work and going to bed. And so they want to stay up during the evening. They're used to watching late night TV or whatever the case might be. And we're saying just the opposite is now what their routine is going to be. If people have never been nappers, are we going to expect them to lay down and take a nap for an hour and a half? That's kind of enforced torture, right? Especially if they already have so much energy that we're not helping them burn off in any other fashion. It's hard in Wisconsin because we can't go outside and take a walk or be out doing physical things for a chunk of the winter. We might be able to walk in the school or something like that, but people might have a lot of energy that they need to use up in some fashion. So how are we helping them to be able to do that? As opposed to saying they should be relaxed and calm, take a nap so I can have a break, whatever the case might be. What does that look like? Okay, the other piece I want to talk to you all about is your own brain health. Okay, brain health as we age. We all should be paying attention to our own brains. So the mantra goes, if it's good for your heart, it's good for your head. Okay? So a lot of things that we do that are heart healthy activities are also really good for our brain. So I want you to keep doing that. So eat well, exercise. I know people are like, oh, everybody says exercise. Figure out what your exercise is and do it. It doesn't mean it has to be anybody else's exercise, okay? You just being physically active. Socialize positively. People become very isolated. People lose their friends. Their families are at a distance and they do much less socializing. We want you to keep socializing positively. Engaging your mind in new and creative activities. That part of learning. We sometimes are not lifelong learners, right? We kind of start floating along. We might do the crossword every day, which is not a bad thing. But how many of the crosswords are pretty repetitive? A lot of them, right? Okay, so if you're a crossword person, can you become a Sudoku person? And people usually are like, woo, words versus numbers, right? Something different like that. You could work on a language. thinking about a different language. And I don't mean become fluent in a different language, but there's a site called duolingo.com, which if you have a little bit of a different language, is just a fun way to practice that and see and learn something different. If you think about the hardest test that you took and how much you had to study for it and how engaged your brain was while you were doing it, is there any time in life now that you are engaged in that way? Not usually, right? Unfortunately, we go through a whole bunch of life kind of on autopilot. That piece of driving home from somewhere and being like, whoa, here I am at home. Don't really remember anything about the drive, right? Because it was rote. But if it was bad weather, or you had road construction, or you had to learn a new way to go, your brain had to think differently, and you had to use it. So that's what I want you to be doing, is activities where you have to use your brain and engage it in a different way. And the other part, which this is not a plug from the parish nurses, but they'll tell you the same thing, you got to manage your health conditions. You got to figure out what your numbers are. You got to keep those in line as much as you can and do everything you can to try to manage everything else going on. When I showed you those different types of dementia, a lot of people have what's called mixed dementia. So they might have Alzheimer's disease, but they might also have big vascular issues, big cardiac issues. So we want to be conscious of that too, to do all we can to prevent our brains from having more of an issue. I brought a ton of resources. When I put them all out on the table, I said, oh, don't tell everybody they don't have to take every one, but I brought them so that you know what's going on. The 10 ways to keep your brain healthy is one of them, and then the Know the 10 Signs is a different one, and that talks about differentiating normal aging from issues of dementia, okay? So what we would normally expect in aging is we would expect somebody's processing time to slow a little bit. We would expect that they might have a little bit more issue learning new things, but we would not be expecting it to impact their day-to-day life, okay? So those are 10 different factors that you might see a change that would make somebody take pause and think, maybe we should have this conversation. If you read that and somebody in your life is having some of those issues that aren't normal aging, one of the really easy things is that the ADRC staff is trained to do cognitive screens. And cognitive screens we kind of refer to as like the blood pressure check for your brain. It's just screening tools to say, where are you on the span of normal? It's not a diagnostic tool, it just is for your information. Just like if you got a high blood pressure reading or a low blood pressure reading, there might be some recommendations that go along with that. When you do a cognitive screen, if you're outside of the range of what's considered normal, then it would be a conversation about what you do with that. So know that that's a free service. It either can happen at our office or it can happen at somebody's home, depending on what they want. I brought a few other things too, just to talk about county resources to support people that are having these issues. We have 2 memory cafes in the county, and those are times for people to be out and about socially. So it might be a daughter and dad who come to that, it might be a spouses who come to that, and we're not there talking about memory loss, we're there learning new things, being socially active, and being physically active, okay? So all those things to keep your brain healthy. So that's what Memory Cafe is. We also have something called the Safety Registry in Ozaukee County. And the Safety Registry is a database that says this is who this person is, this is where they think they live, these are great topics to talk to them about, this is a vehicle they could possibly be driving, this is where they consider home, and these are all their contacts. And that database is for in case somebody left home or got lost when they were out and about in the community, okay? Because if you wake up in the morning and your dad who you're caring for is not home, you probably won't sit by the phone, right? And wait for them to come home. You might go looking for them. Well, if law enforcement finds your dad and knows where he lives, the only number they have for you is your home number, not your cell phone number. So we want them to have your cell phone number. We want them to have your sister's number. We want them to have your neighbor's number, whoever you're going to list on that, so that we can reunite people as quickly as possible. It also has a picture in the database. Because if I looked around this room and I said, we're looking for a woman in her 50s with brown hair, okay, who are we looking for? Right? If I say this is who we're looking for, it's much easier for law enforcement to be looking for that person, and they can pull it up in their squads. So that's another free service that the county has, collaborating with law enforcement, that also encapsulates all the information needed to issue a silver alert. And a silver alert is that piece that says somebody's gone missing and we need to help find them. Some of you might be on the Justice Department's notification. You might have seen that on the overhead signs, like an Amber Alert. It's just an older adult who has gone missing. They maybe are walking. Somebody recently was hitchhiking. Some other folks were driving. So we want to just make sure that people are found as quickly as possible, because that's precarious. It's precarious for people to be out and about. People have been, driving to their daughter's house 15 minutes away and found in North Dakota. It's that dramatic that people get way lost quickly. They're on the freeway and they're on the freeway the wrong way and they don't realize it for a real long period of time, and then being able to backtrack is not possible. So we want to make sure that is not an issue. I also brought two classes that are coming up that people may be interested in, and this isn't necessarily dementia related, but there are two things that you might enjoy. One is called Stepping On, and that's a falls prevention class. That's a great evidence-based class to help people not fall, okay? Falls are one of the risks of dementia, falls and head injuries. So we want to make sure people aren't falling and are as safe as they possibly can be. And there's another class called Powerful Tools for Caregivers. And it might be caregivers of people with some form of dementia, but it might be, the caregiver of somebody with mental health issues, or the caregiver of somebody with MS, or whatever the case might be. And it's talking about caring for yourself as you're caring for somebody else. So that's another really great evidence-based program that's out there that you can take advantage of. And I think the other piece that I have out there, I'm looking to see, two other things. One, we have a program called Music and Memory. When I was talking to you about music, that is an incredible program. And what it is we develop a personalized playlist for somebody that probably is from their 20s, 30s, late teens, somewhere in that age span. And we put music on an iPod shuffle, and we give them the shuffle and we give them headphones, and they love it. So it is one of those programs that if you would say music instead of medication, that's really what it's for. So that it does reduce your anxiety, it does take you to a happy place. If I'm listening to music from the 80s, I can be in a happy place. So folks that we've developed playlists for have been in a very different place. It's been great. One woman, again, who was pretty minimally verbal and not incredibly responsive, was serenading her husband and dancing with him. Her daughter sent me 2 video clips and said, "You can't believe how fabulous this was. This is so great." So know that that's a program that's out there. We have the music. We can use their music if they have CDs and load it on, but that's one program. We also have a variety of safety equipment. So we have door alarms, we have motion sensor lights, we have different pieces of equipment. Because when I go out with Adult Protective Services, because somebody's out, right? Somebody has left the house repeatedly in the middle of the night, and I say to a completely stressed out caregiver, it'd be really great if you got a door alarm. Why don't you go to Home Depot in your spare time and install a door alarm? What are the odds that that's going to happen? Before I come back, why don't you do that? Guess when I'm coming back? Never, right? They're never going to invite me back because they didn't install the stupid door alarm. So if I say instead, here's a door alarm, let's put it up, that works a little bit better, right? I was saying to some social workers the other day, what's the cost of this? What's, all this equipment, different stuff that we bought, what's the cost of it? A couple $100, it isn't much, but what's the savings of it? Having somebody not be outside without somebody knowing for hours in winter, right? Hospitalization, falls, all different kinds of things. So that's another part of what we're doing at the county. And those are all different things that I can go out and talk to with somebody, and it can be not a visit from the county, right? I always get worried when people are like, she's here from the county, because they think I'm gonna take them, right? That's why the county comes, to take people. You're gonna make me leave my house. No, I promise I won't. You know, I'm gonna be here to help you in any way that I can and be here to bring you resources. The other piece that's on the table is something called dementia-friendly action steps, and that just talks about things that you can do to be involved in this movement besides working within your congregation. Also thinking about getting silver alerts, doing your own power of attorney for healthcare. That's one of our big pieces. We sometimes are doing virtual dementia tours or encountering dementia realities in the community so people can get an idea of what it might be like for somebody to be experiencing dementia and raise that level of awareness. We also have dementia-friendly business training because we're working very hard with businesses on what is your customer service like that you can support people best in your own business entity, okay? So if I go out to a restaurant and I am trying to order, how many questions do you think I need to answer to order? Maybe 8? I mean, a lot, right? And we might ask all those questions at one time as a waitress. Or we might slow the bus down and say, you know, do you want chicken or beef? Or whatever the case might be, especially when people have been in there often. One of the restaurants that I have gone to in Brookfield that does a beautiful job of it has people that come there every day. And so they can say, you know what, you had stew yesterday. What do you think about chicken? And the person might say, oh, that sounds great. Okay, what do you think? Do you want potatoes or do you want a salad? Oh, I think I'll have a salad. Okay, you know, can we just slow down how that conversation goes and what we're asking people and helping them get what they need? The other thing this business does, which I completely love, is for their regulars, they will ask them, if you didn't show up, is there anybody that should know? Okay, so what have they heard from family? Oh my gosh, it is such a relief to me to know that if Dad didn't come in there, somebody would notice, right? So that has been a great thing. And not that they do it for 100 people, they have, I don't know, 4 or 5 regulars that are there every single day. But that's a very different question, and that's a really good thing for informal support to say, if you weren't here, I'd call your daughter, you know? And she might say, oh yeah, he's at the doctor, or whatever the case is, but she might say, I don't know where he is. You know, let me check. I thank you for letting me know that he didn't show up where he's expected. So those are some of the kinds of things that we want people to be thinking about. Again, we want people to be supporting your neighbors and watching out for your neighbors too. So as much as I am going to tell you about different county supports, like for my husband's grandma, she was the caregiver of Grandpa, okay? If something happened to Grandma, could he get help? No, okay? We're always talking about people wearing lifelines, and I'm telling caregivers to wear lifelines, okay? Because if something happens to them, their loved one can't help them, can't give them support. So for Grandma, we said, she was having an issue one day, and we said to her neighbor, you'd call us, right, if you saw something going on? And she said, of course I would, except I don't have your number, right? So do neighbors have somebody's number to get a hold of them, or do they just recognize you when you drive up? They know what car you have, they know your name, but they don't have your number. So our deal with the neighbor was, if her front shade wasn't up by 10 a.m., she'd let somebody know, okay? That didn't mean she had to go over and see what was going on. It didn't mean anything intrusive. It just meant that she'd let somebody know if that was the situation. So it can even be that basic. So we don't want people to be on the floor for 2 days and nobody noticing, okay? So those are some of those really informal pieces that we can work on. So that's my way too much information in a nutshell. You know, I tell you all these things not to do, and then I do them. So you have my PowerPoint and you have my contact information. All those resources are on the table. I'm around if you want to talk a little bit afterward. Anybody have any questions or things that didn't make sense? Yeah.
I do. Just some of the programs, like the one for caregivers.
Mm-hmm.
Do those people need to be resident of Ozark County in order to go?
No, they don't. And nor does Memory Cafe or Stepping On, because we have a fair amount of people that come from the south, that live in northern Milwaukee County, and it's easier for them to come up by us than it is to go, into downtown. So Memory Cafe, the support groups, all those kinds of things, anybody can. Safety registries, only Ozaki County. The equipment is Ozaki
Right.
County, but other than
No,
that.
I just
yeah.
wondered about the programs that are available to the caregivers.
Yeah, yeah, because, it's really ugly when we say, oh, you live a mile and a half the opposite way, so let's not do that. That's the other part that we're doing in a big way is we're working with other counties around us to be dementia friendly. So Washington County hired somebody in a comparable role to me, and she and I have been collaborating since she started in July to say, this is what we've done in Ozaki County, here's some thoughts about what you might want to do. My boss and I went and trained the Sheboygan County ADRC staff on how to do cognitive screens, so now they're capable of doing that and they're starting their work, so I've shared PowerPoints and all kinds of resources with them, and we're kind of mentoring them, and that's really how this movement goes, is we just want the ripple to continue. So it isn't about one person, but it's about how are we all adopting this mindset and making it work in our individual communities.
Can you tell besides the memory cafes, there's the nature center?
Yeah.
Because I have a friend who goes there, and she said that they do, like now is maple sugar time, and they
Right.
do crafts and activities and.
And that is the
Yeah.
Memory Cafe.
Oh, is that a cafe? Okay,
Yep,
that's
yep.
considered a cafe too.
Mhm. One
Okay.
of them is at River Edge, and the other is at Flipside.
Right, okay,
Yep, yeah, and River Edge has been phenomenal.
right.
So when we talked to them, we kind of thought like, hey, this could be a fun place. They have a ton of things that for us to learn and explore and everything, and they have fabulous programs. What do you think about partnering with us? And they said it's so interesting because our board is saying, how are you reaching adults and older adults in new and creative ways? So it just was one of those perfect marriages that as soon as we started, we were rolling right from the start. Unfortunately, the first day was 40 below because we decided to start in January at the Nature Center, so we only had 2 people, but we have had a wonderful time since then, and it started a year ago in January, so that has been wonderful. Well, thanks everybody for coming.
Oh.